On Monday the 21st of October, I sat down with the British Consul General for Northern Spain, Lloyd Milen, after hosting an open Q&A to explain the implications of Brexit on our lives. Many may have already heard the mantra of the 4 key things that we should have in place. Number 1, ensure we have our residency in order, that is the A4 green certificate or green credit card size document. Number 2, change our UK driver's licence to a Spanish one, or at the very least make sure we have started the process as quickly as possible. Number 3, confirm our healthcare provision status. This is effectively having the Tarjeta Identidad, or if you're a British pensioner in Spain without a health card, you must present documentary evidence of your right to access healthcare from the UK. And number 4, confirm the validity of your passport. As Mr. Milen explained to us, if you have these 4 things in order, very little will change in your day-to-day life, apart from some extra paperwork. But life in Spain was ever thus. The residency certificate that many of us have may not have been updated to state permanent residency after 5 years in Spain, or may not have been updated for the change of address. This is not a serious problem. Having the document is the main thing, and you will need it to exchange for the Tarjeta Identidad Extranjera, a foreign identity card, once Britain leaves the EU. You cannot do that yet, as we are still members of the EU. There will be a grace period, so there is no need to panic if you cannot get an appointment straight away. If you have not made arrangements to complete your residency paperwork, we cannot stress enough how urgent and important this is. Please make an appointment immediately to arrange this. We talked about these 4 key points, but also covered pets, pensions, voting, and the benefit of being married to an EU national. Links to all the websites mentioned are provided for useful information, and we repeat the advice the consulate gave us to sign up for their email alerts. Brexit, for us Brits in Spain at least, is nowhere near as scary as it's made out to be, and we hope this information and the sources shared here will help alleviate a lot of concerns. There are certain things to bear in mind, and we gained in feedback from those attending the session. We will not be able to vote in European or national elections, but local elections are not only still open to us to participate, but even to stand as candidates. There will be a loss of access to UK NHS services if you are a UK national resident in Spain. One point of particular concern that did come up, and unfortunately the Consul General could not confirm or deny for us, is the possibility that when we change to our T.I.E. from our current residency status, it wasn't clear whether we would continue with the same DNI number. Now obviously if the number changes, a lot of our paperwork and materials have to change with it, which would be an area of frustration, but it is hoped that the Spanish government will simply maintain the same number that you have at the moment. But otherwise, the mood was positive and a great many concerns were dispelled. Without further ado, I will hand you over to Mr. Milen to explain further.
Well, I think one of the reasons why we're carrying out these outreach events, and one of the reasons why we've put lots of effort into updating our Living in Spain guide on gov.uk, and also the Spanish government have updated their page on La Moncloa website, is because we know that there is some uncertainty amongst the British resident community here. And part of the job of this evening and the information that's on our website is to say to people, there are going to be some changes, but you don't need to be fearful of what those changes are. If you've done basically 4 things, so if you have checked you've got your correct residency document, if you've checked how you access healthcare, if you've converted your UK driving licence into a Spanish driving licence, and if you've checked if your passport will still be valid.
Yep.
And they are the 4 things that we say to people. These are the top 4 things that you can do to make sure that basically your life can continue almost exactly as it is now once we leave the European Union.
Excellent, excellent. Now, one thing that did catch me by surprise this evening, which is specific to my scenario, is you mentioned inheritance of European Union rights if you are married to a European Union citizen. Now, this is news to me, and I am married to a European Union citizen, so what does that entail?
There's a lot of detailed information on the website of the European Commission, so people who are in that position can look there. But by virtue, it happens now, third country nationals who are married to an EU national are guaranteed certain rights within the European Union as family members of an EU citizen. Now, once the UK leaves the European Union and British citizens stop being European Union nationals, if they are married to a European Union national, basically their rights continue in that same way. So they are a family member of a European Union national. Now, that isn't something that the British government can sort of confer upon somebody, because we won't be members of the European Union.
Understood.
But if people want more information on that, my advice is to check either the European Union website, so europa.eu, or to check with their local Extranjería office.
And you mentioned during the conversation that that is important information to mention when you are changing your document after we have left the European Union.
So if you're married to a European Union member spouse, you'll need to make sure when you get your new residence card from the Extranjería office, you'll need to explain to them on what basis you're applying for that card. Now, you may be applying for it because you've been a British national resident here on your green certificate, and that is something that will give you the card. But you may get a slightly different card if you've been, or if you are the family member of a European Union, you're a spouse of a European Union national. It will give you a slightly different card, slightly different rights. You'll be registered in a slightly different way. But generally, for both of those groups of people, you can continue living, working and studying here in Spain if you've got your residency documents sorted out, deal or no deal, for as long as you wish to do so.
And this is the important phrase, as long as you wish to do so. There's not any prospect of...
There's not a time limit on those rights. Yep. Those rights are there, and the Real Decreto makes that clear, is that those rights are there for as long as you wish to continue living in Spain.
Excellent. Now, we talked a bit about travel, and there's the 90 days within every 180 days, is that right, in the Schengen area?
So if you're a tourist, from the UK visiting the Schengen area, people coming on holiday won't need a visa.
Yep.
And they've said that, and there's a time limit on that, which is for people whose holiday lasts less than 90 days in any 180-day period.
Yep.
I think, as I said to you earlier, I don't know many people who have more than 90 days holiday every 6 months.
Yo tampoco.
If only. But there are some people who might have a holiday home here and might come here for 5 months of the year who that may affect, and those people need to check our website and check the website of the Spanish government for how that may impact upon them. But for everybody else who's visiting here, if you've got friends and family coming, they can come to the Schengen area from up to 90 days in any 180-day period. Now, given that we're residents, so if you've got your residency documentation, those time limits obviously don't apply to people who have their residency documentation here. So this is only for tourists, only for visitors.
Yep.
What does impact upon travel is the validity of someone's passport. Now, your passport that you have in your hand won't change because we leave the European Union. But there are a couple of things just to bear in mind. One is that it doesn't matter whether it says European Union on your passport or not. The passport remains valid. What does change is the length of time that your passport may be valid for. And there are two reasons for that. One is that at the moment, if you apply for your British passport early, the sort of time left over on your old passport can be applied to your new passport, up to 6 months. So you may find that your passport, like mine, is valid for 10 years and 3 months.
Yep.
Now, when we leave the European Union, those additional 3 months won't be counted.
This is because the Schengen agreement complies with a certain factor of
Just a passport is valid for 10 years maximum.
That's it. But they also have an idea where there is a minimum amount of time you must have left on the validity of your passport within 6 months.
And that's the other thing. So as long as your passport is valid for basically for 10 years from the date it's issued, but for travel in and out of the Schengen area, you need to have at least 6 months validity left on your passport. Now, this, isn't something unusual. If you go to Turkey or Morocco, they will always say you have to have at least 6 months validity on your passport.
Situation.
So your passport doesn't run out while you're there, basically. And they're saying the same for British people entering the Schengen area. So the easiest thing to do is to look at when your passport was issued and to just add 9.5 years onto the date your passport was issued. If you want, there's even a handy website on gov.uk where you can check the length of time that your passport will be valid
The
for.
Schengen calculator, is that?
I don't know exactly what it's called, but it's there. And if you look on gov.uk living in Spain and look for passports, I think there's a link there direct to that part of the website.
Perfect. One area which is very important to us British people is our pets.
Yes.
And we are all major dog lovers and cat lovers here. Most people in Zaragoza, I know, have animals and pets as well. I heard some good news this evening, which is effectively if your pet is passported and chipped with a Spanish document, there's no problem going backwards and forwards.
There are fewer changes, but we advise people to check our website and the website of the Moncloa for the details on pet passports. If a pet has a UK pet passport, there are rather more significant changes.
Exactly.
And people will need to basically consult their vet and consult the webpage of Living in Spain, where there's a lot of information all about the changes to the validity of pet passports. In a similar way, there is a lot of information about changes to people's driving licences. Now, one of the things that we say to people is, and we've said this even before Brexit was ever thought of, is that if you're living in Spain and you're driving, get a Spanish driving licence. It's the simplest thing to do. It is not a complicated process. Now, once we leave the European Union, basically, over a period of time, UK driving licences won't be valid unless they're accompanied by what's called an international driving permit. Now, the issue there is that you can only get an international driving permit if you live in the UK. So if you're a resident here on a UK driving licence, you can't get an international driving permit, in which case that licence will become invalid. Our advice to people is get a Spanish licence. A Spanish licence is and will be, into the future, always valid in the UK for hiring a car or for using it as your driving licence. No problems using a Spanish driving licence in the UK.
And beg your pardon on that, because one thing some people have asked me is if you have a Spanish licence, it's completely valid in the UK, but if people go back to live in the UK, the process to convert it back is not a complicated one either.
No, because the Spanish licence will be recognised in the UK.
Excellent.
But if people are here, and if they don't go through the process, the Spanish authorities are asking people who've got a UK driving licence to make an appointment before the 1st of November for that transfer. And what they've said is that UK driving licences will be valid for up to 9 months in Spain. But at the end of that 9-month period, if you've not begun the process in order to transfer your UK driving licence to a Spanish one, in order to do so, you would have to set another Spanish driving test.
Crikey.
Now, if you want to just, now you can just go and do the change. You go to the traffic department, you stand in a queue, you fill out quite a few forms, you pay the fee, which isn't a huge amount of money. You might need to have a medical test depending on when you set your test in the UK. And the process is basically a bureaucratic process. You're just swapping one document from another with a few formalities thrown in. You don't have to set a test. If people don't exchange their licences during this period, then they risk having to set a Spanish driving test.
Which will be no fun for anybody.
No fun for anybody, and quite expensive. So it's going to be quite a lot of money that people will have to pay out.
Obviously, great deal of people concerned about pensions, but as I understand...
they don't need to be.
They don't need to be.
They don't need to be.
There you go.
So basically, people will have... you can have your UK state pension paid anywhere in the world, and that will continue. What the UK government has said as well is that they will continue for a period, guaranteeing the uplift in people's pensions that they currently get. That's guaranteed for a period because we're then working with the Spanish authorities to see how the technicalities of continuing that arrangement will work into the future. But there's desire on behalf of the British government and the Spanish to make sure that those processes can continue into the future. As I said, you can have a UK pension paid anywhere in the world.
Yep. And a quick question I had for you earlier on, which was about people like myself who aren't quite at pensionable age, but have accrued PAYE.
A few years to go yet now.
Unfortunately, yeah. We've accrued some years in England or Britain and several years here in Spain. You were telling me that it's a simple process of informing the INSS, is that correct?
Yeah, so basically what the Spanish authorities have said is that you can do what they call accruing the pension contributions that you've made in different countries in Europe. And what the Spanish authorities have said is that they will continue guaranteeing the right to accrue those pension contributions from the UK, even in the event of no deal, as long as those pension contributions were made before we leave the European Union. So if those pension contributions have already been made, that's fine, they're guaranteed. The Spanish have said that you will continue being able to, accrue them, lump them together with whatever contributions you make in Spain or anywhere else. Perfect. Now, if you've made contributions in France, in Germany, in Denmark, in Greece, in other European Union countries, no change whatsoever, because the issue is it's the nationality of the contributions, not the person, that counts. And because all of the countries will remain within the European Union, no change whatsoever being able to accrue your French, German, Danish or Greek pension contributions into a Spanish pension.
And likewise, healthcare rests similarly upon correct registration.
So again, if you're working and paying social security contributions here in Spain, your healthcare will continue as it is now. What this Real Decreto, what the Spanish authorities have said is, even in the event of no deal, the people's healthcare will continue being able to access their healthcare. When we leave the European Union, even in the event of no deal, there'll be no sort of sudden overnight change.
Exactly.
But if you're working and paying contributions here in Spain, just as an American or an Australian or someone from elsewhere in the world can do, that's what counts. The Spanish system is a contributions-based system.
And so the final question really is about voting and representation. We had a brief discussion about that when the people were here. You talked about the British government's intention to put in a Voting for Life act or law in Britain, but we will still retain the right to vote in the municipality elections here in Spain. But how would our voting rights work in Britain?
Well, as you know, you retain the right to vote in national elections in the UK until you have been absent from the UK for more than 15 years. So as long as you've left the UK within the last 15 years, you can register to vote, a postal vote, a proxy vote, in the UK via the Electoral Commission in the UK. And you can continue to do that as long as you've not been out of the UK for more than 15 years. Now, for the previous elections, it was in the manifesto of the Conservative Party that they wanted to bring in a Votes for Life bill. Fortunately, there wasn't time in the last Parliament to do that, so that fell. But I know the intentions have been there across parties to look at bringing in a change to the voting law. It's not there at the moment. But the important thing I think to stress on this matter is that the negotiations between the Spanish and British government made sure that we could guarantee that people can continue to vote in the municipal elections. Now, in Spain, as you will know, your town hall controls a lot that affects you in your daily life. So they're really important. But even more important than that is it also guarantees your right to stand as a candidate in those local authority elections. Across Spain, we have lots of British people who are councillors in their local town halls. We even have, political parties made up of British people. And those rights to stand, to be a candidate and to vote in those municipal town hall elections will continue. And that's really important. And that's the same for Spanish nationals in the UK. So they'll also continue with that right to vote.
Can EU nationals in the UK, do we have the intention are they allowed to vote in national elections in the UK?
No.
So generally, that's not going to change either.
No, in most, with some differences depending on agreements between individual countries.
Right.
But generally, you need to be a citizen of the country in which you live in order to vote in their national elections.
Which is different to residency.
Yes.
Exactly. Well, I think that covers pretty much most of the most important bases. I'd like to thank you both very much for your time.
No, thank you.
Very much appreciated. And I hope we can see you again when things no doubt change and we have to look at different situations.
If the appetite is there to invite us back to Zaragoza or anywhere in Aragon to meet and talk with the British community, we're there. If people can't get to one of the events that we're running, check in, with yourselves and the information that I know you're helping us share with the British community here, or things like our Facebook Live events. We do similar events where we get out and speak to the people, but virtually via Facebook, and we do those every so often. Again, sign up to our Facebook page, which is Brits in Spain.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank
Have
you.
a safe journey home.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Bye-bye.